The Star Wars universe is full of contradictions. It's not very well thought out. It's a world full of self-aware artificial intelligence and faster than light travel, yet it's riddled with magical sorcerers who can summon lightning from their fingertips. It's also a world in which every background character has hundreds of pages of intense backstory written about them, but Yoda's species doesn't even have a name. Star Wars. What's up? While sentient robots and warp speed are commonplace in science fiction, there is one unique element of Star Wars that has captivated audiences for decades: the anachronistic bladed weapon that is the lightsaber. But just how close are we to having a real lightsaber? And are any of the current claims that really do exist of creating the world's first lightsaber, well, are they actually accurate? Or are they just bullshit? So, let's start with Disney's claim. Yes, really, because it's an easy one. Their supposedly real lightsaber, while impressive when first turned on, is total bullshit. It's just made for show. The device extends from the hilt like in the movies while making the famous lightsaber sound, but that's about all it's good for. Featured in the Galactic Starcruiser experience at Disney World, the fancy new weapon is turned on in front of the audience before being clumsily swapped out for a different model. Their device is essentially just two LED tape measures attached to one another that can be extended with the press of a button. Exactly what we were hoping for, is it, Disney? It's real! It's not Disney! It's not real! You lied! As for retracting the blade/tape measure, the process probably has to be done manually or is slow and looks horrible, hence why no one has ever seen Disney's patented lightsaber retract, only ever extend. The construction is also far too flimsy to use even in a choreographed battle, necessitating the switching during the performance. And look, it makes sense that Disney, a mass media company, would be designing neat-looking props rather than functional weapons of death. But how possible is a lightsaber? And what of the other claims that one already exists? Let's go. What is a lightsaber? Alright, so how close we are to a lightsaber and whether one possibly exists depends on how we define it. As depicted, it looks like a laser sword about 3 feet long. The blade is made of superheated plasma and can cut through literally anything in the universe like butter. It can chop off a person's limb while instantly cauterizing the wound. When used by a skilled Jedi possessing magical mystic powers, they can even deflect plasma bolts from a blaster. Now, none of that is remotely realistic in any way, at least not in the way it's portrayed in the movies. A superheated blade of plasma should be able to cut through just about anything, but it wouldn't be instantaneous, not even when cutting through something relatively weak like a piece of flesh. A metal blade cuts by applying a large amount of force over an extremely small surface area. The pressure applied by the edge of the blade pushes the matter on either side away from it, and rather intuitively, the sharper a blade and the more force is applied, the faster and easier it is to cut through something, and the cleaner the cut will be. I know, we're blowing your mind right now. However, lightsabers don't have a cutting edge. They appear to be cylindrical, about 1 inch in diameter, and they use intense heat to cut. Now, because they're applying heat to an object rather than pressure, the ability to cut through something comes down to its specific heat, which refers to the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of a specific substance. Lightsabers are generally depicted as cutting through things by the process of either melting or sublimation, turning solids into either liquid or gas. In reality, this process would take time. If a human were to be struck with a lightsaber moving quickly, they would not be in contact with the plasma long enough for it to raise the temperature of the exposed body part to cause any serious damage. At least not until reaching temperatures so extreme that the person attempting to hold the lightsaber would be dead long before they could even attempt to swing it. We're sorry. So how does it work? Canonically, a lightsaber works by emitting plasma from the hilt, then using a powerful electromagnetic field to turn the plasma back in on itself, forming a tight ring. This part, in and of itself, isn't actually just science fiction. A tokamak is a machine that exists for this exact purpose, although the ring of plasma it creates is more of a donut shape rather than being a ring so tight that it would resemble a blade. Certain types of manufacturing also use magnetic fields to create plasma windows, which are shaped exactly like they sound like they would be. These magnetic fields not only give the plasma its blade-like shape, but they also are used to explain why they would function in Jedi combat the way that they are depicted. If two beams of plasma were to cross one another, they would simply pass right through each other. This sad reality would make for some pretty lame sword fight. So they needed to come up with a workaround. The magnetic fields that give the lightsabers their shape also repel one another, allowing the lightsaber to be blocked by another and generating the iconic noise that we all know. Whether this would actually work in practical application is a different question entirely. Look, realistically, if two such plasma swords were to make contact with one another, the magnetic fields would disrupt each other, resulting in plasma arcing unpredictably, potentially causing injury or death to either user. Even worse, if the plasma were to arc in such a way that damaged the part of the hilt that was creating the magnetic fields, the plasma would lose its shape and fire out indefinitely, which is an absolutely decidedly bad thing. Fortunately, none of that is a concern because this is fiction, and also the amount of energy required to power a lightsaber is currently absolutely impossible. It's not impossible to create the necessary amount of power, but a lightsaber would require some sort of battery that could produce as much energy as, wait for it, an entire nuclear power plant in the hilt. Look, given our current level of technology, such a power source would essentially be, well, magic. Which brings us to the final piece of how Star Wars' iconic technology works. Yeah, it works with magic. Even with all the pseudoscientific explanations given regarding lightsabers within the Star Wars universe, an important and often overlooked component is that they are magical devices. While a person does not need to use the Force to wield a lightsaber, the Force is required to manufacture them. And oh yeah, they're also powered by magic crystals. While there is some scientific basis for creating a ring of plasma that would look like a lightsaber, having the entire thing contained within the hilt is just completely unrealistic. It may be possible that a battery could eventually exist to power such a device, but we are nowhere near close to developing anything remotely like that. Do you remember how I said it was an entire nuclear power plant's worth of energy? It's not going to work. In fact, as far as professional scientists go, we're nowhere near developing a lightsaber at all. Despite being such an iconic piece of the Star Wars franchise and a fan favorite request, there is virtually no one attempting to create these incredible devices. Why do you even want a lightsaber? Like we said, scientists aren't really working on building lightsabers, and with good reason. Why would you even want one? Obi-Wan Kenobi referred to them as an elegant weapon for a more civilized age. But are they? Look, dude, guns exist. Ever since guns became prevalent, people stopped using swords as weapons. They realized, don't bring a sword to a gunfight. If someone shows up to a fight with a lightsaber, I would still rather have a gun that exists today. And it doesn't need a nuclear power plant inside it. In some places, it's still common for soldiers to have a sword or a knife as a last resort, but there is no elite military squadron that charges into battle brandishing only swords against an enemy force armed with assault rifles because, well, that would obviously be f***ing insane. In the movies, lightsabers, when used by a skilled Jedi, are depicted as being able to easily deflect plasma bolts from blasters, but without both incredible reflexes and psycho powers, this would be absolutely impossible. Though the bolts in the movie seem to travel about as slow as a Nerf bow and arrow, plasma would actually be moving at roughly 500 kilometers a second. Even if we could make functional lightsabers, someone could easily just still shoot you. And let's be real here, you have no business owning a lightsaber. Most people who want one view them as toys, something they can swing around in their backyard with their friends. However, a lightsaber would be an extremely deadly weapon. We've lost count of how many limbs have been chopped off with lightsabers in the Star Wars movies. It's a lot. There would be a lot more if kids could be waving them around in their backyards. Look, even if it's worked, just like it's shown in the movies, with the wounds being instantly cauterized, that is still far too dangerous for someone to own. In reality, if the plasma was actually hot enough to cause that sort of damage when quickly swung through a person, something on the order of 20 to 25,000 degrees Celsius, the damage it would do would be far, far worse than depicted in the movies. But again, such a weapon should be impossible for a person to even wield, what with it being 4 to 5 times hotter than the f***ing surface of the sun. The magnetic field could theoretically contain this heat such that it doesn't radiate outward and cause damage to the user, but when it comes to trying to explain the physics of lightsabers, there seems to be a requisite amount of hand-waving and theoretical solutions with an unclear amount of practicality. That may be why the official canon didn't try to get too scientific and said that lightsabers are made by using magic and crystals. And still people f***ing debate me over the fact that Star Wars is a fantasy show. It is not science fiction. So when it comes to the utility of the lightsaber, Han Solo said it best: hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster. What about the guy who built a real lightsaber? The Guinness Book of World Records was created as a way to settle bar bets back in an age before smartphones gave us easy access to all of the world's information. That does not make them experts in science or any field for that matter, but well, that didn't stop them handing out awards for both the first retractable lightsaber and the first retractable proto-lightsaber, both created by YouTubers. The first was created by Russian YouTuber Alex Birkin, with the latter being created by Canadian YouTuber James Hobson. They're built on the same principles, so we're going to focus on the proto-lightsaber as it looks much more like what a person would expect. In both instances, the lightsaber is really just a glorified blowtorch, but they still did look cool as all hell. The proto-lightsaber in particular, thanks to some clever engineering, maintains a more consistent size and shape. The reason it's referred to as a proto-lightsaber is because rather than being contained entirely within the hilt like a traditional lightsaber, the hilt is connected to a backpack that supplies the fuel. The fuel comes in the form of a mixture of oxygen and propane, which is ignited to create a roughly 1 meter blade reaching approximately 4,000 degrees Celsius. Though the burning of these fuels does result in the creation of some plasma, the stream produced by the apparatus is not a plasma blade by any stretch of the imagination. The test videos show that the length of the blade is subject to change when it moves as a result of air currents. Also, it does not maintain its shape while cutting through materials as it is depicted in the movies. Instead, the flame will stop when it reaches something that it needs to cut through, as would be expected, with the blade-like structure not reappearing until it's fully melted through the object, because that's how a blowtorch works. Now, this comes back to the specific heat that we mentioned earlier. It takes time to heat things up, so while these lightsabers can cut through a steel door, it's not going to slice through reinforced blast shields like butter. In fact, James even performs a test in which he waves his hand through the blade multiple times without any adverse effects, because the fraction of a second that his hand was in contact with the flame was not nearly long enough for it to heat it up to the point of causing damage, let alone effortlessly just chop his hand off. As for hand-to-hand combat, a second of these proto-lightsabers was created, and the blades just go through one another as expected. It's a far cry from what people have seen depicted in Star Wars, but it's a good first step. This was also the first step taken in the official Star Wars canon, as their proto-lightsabers required a backpack to power them as well. Because it is similar to the manner in which lightsabers were developed in the fictional universe, it has instilled people with a lot of hope that we're well on our way to making fiction a reality. However, while both of these devices are designed to look like a lightsaber, they're not the closest we've come to making one. The closest thing in the real world to an actual lightsaber is a plasma cutting torch. The plasma only extends about an inch, but it's designed as a tool to cut through metals like steel rather than being frivolously designed as a medieval weapon. This design also increases the efficiency of it as a cutting tool, as it utilizes a much thinner area of plasma. The less of the metal that needs to be heated, the faster it will happen. So how soon until we have real lightsabers? This is a really difficult question to answer, because building lightsabers isn't a serious scientific pursuit the way artificial intelligence or intergalactic travel is. In theory, a lot of the technology already exists. The main limiting factor is a power source, as the amount of energy required to sustain the ring of plasma and the magnetic field would be absolutely massive. The missing key component is likely going to be a major advancement in nanobatteries. It's speculated that within 50 years we could be having nanobatteries capable of producing the amount of energy required to power a lightsaber entirely contained within the hilt. But that doesn't mean lightsabers are less than 50 years away. To start, in theory, a lot of the technology exists, but it's still just theory. Based on the other uses of plasma combined with some physics calculations, it seems that these weapons are fundamentally possible. However, a lot of testing would be required to see if the tight plasma ring could be contained and held safely by such a small device, and if the magnetic field could prevent the plasma from arcing erratically, particularly upon coming into contact with another object. Lightsabers are effective neither as a tool nor as a weapon, so there isn't going to be any serious effort from the scientific community to make them a reality. The work will need to be done by hobbyists and fans of Star Wars, similar to the current Guinness record holders. But look, the reality is, if you're looking for a weapon, you'd be better off with a regular-ass gun. If you're looking for a prop that you can use to reenact cool Jedi battles with your friends, just buy a sturdy toy lightsaber. If one of you slips, the worst thing that happens is you're going to get bonked on the head with a bit of plastic. If one of you slip with a real lightsaber, the results would be far more graphic and severe than anything ever depicted in the Star Wars franchise.